As a graduate student at U of T, he started a lifetime of research into the ecology of coral reefs, tropical coastal management, and the ecology of fishes. This research spanned a career at the University of Sydney, University of New Hampshire, University of Windsor, and most recently, United Nations University's Institute for Water, Environment, and Health. He remains Distinguished Professor Emeritus at the University of Windsor. He is the author of 2 books. Our Dying Planet tells the story of our impacts on the environment from the perspective of an ecologist who has seen environmental decline with his very own eyes. Coral Reefs, Majesty Realms Under the Sea, reveals the wondrousness of these ecosystems while reflecting on why we don't value the natural world as we should. For the past 12 years, Peter has brought his expertise in aquatic ecology to the Muskoka Watershed Council, an amazing community resource on which he serves as chair. Climate change is real. It's a very big deal. Few of us realize how big it is. We can manage climate change, but only if we put substantial effort into doing so. Peter brings us this message tonight. We're thrilled to have him with us, so please give him a warm, recumbent welcome. Thank you.
Having watched the video, I'm almost tempted to say we should quit right now and start talking about what we're going to do, and to hell with what I'm going to say. Thank you for that nice introduction. I really enjoyed working with the Watershed Council. It's an amazing group of volunteers. It is an incorporated nonprofit. A lot of people in Muskoka think we're part of the government. Apparently we do such a good job, they're sure we're part of the government. We don't quite understand that. Anyway, I'm going to talk to you about climate change. I'm trying to convince you that it really is real, and that it's important right here. I'm delighted to be part of this launching exercise. It's wonderful to see groups springing up in different parts of Ontario and saying we've got to do something, because we really need those groups. So let's see how successful you can be in a few years' time. Because coral reefs are the place where I learned what climate change is doing. And it began in 1998. And it was a year of very warm water because it was an El Nino year. It was the strongest El Nino the world had ever experienced since we started recording them. And the water in Australia and around the world in the tropics was warmer than usual. The corals were stressed, and when corals are stressed, they bleach. Bleaching is not death. If the stressful situation goes away, they can recover. Some of them did. But around the world during 1998, one after the other, reefs bleached all the way around. It never happened before. And a lot of corals died. There are reefs in the Indian Ocean even today that are completely dead of coral because they've never been recolonized since 1998. It should have been a wake-up call to the world. It was a wake-up call to me and a number of other coral reef scientists, but it didn't wake up the world because 20 years later we were still talking about it. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in a report in which they pointed out that 1.5 degrees was much better than 2 degrees. This is what they said about coral reefs, and you can read it. I don't have to speak it to you. But when scientists start talking about more than 99%, what they're really saying is coral reefs are toast. Mostly, of course, we all heard this information. We've heard it multiple times. We all think it's terrible. It's a really bad thing to happen. and then we forget about it. And that's true with most things about climate change. And the fact that we didn't realize how significant this was is why I wrote the book on coral reefs. In March of 2022, just a few months ago, the Great Barrier Reef bleached. This was the fourth time that it bleached since 2016. Only the sixth time it has ever bleached since people started looking at reefs, which in the case of the Barrier Reef is back in the 1920s. Which just shows how recent this phenomenon is and how rapidly it's changing. And this all happened in a La Nina year, not a year that was exceptionally warm. It's just that the world has warmed up in the last 20 years, and even in a normal sort of a year, you can get that bleaching. Around the world, coral reefs have now lost 50% of the coral they had in 1970. Not entirely because of climate change. It's been other things as well. We've done lots of bad things to coral reefs. But 50%. And that's like losing half the trees on the planet. Let's think about that. Over the last 20 years, I've been talking about climate change to groups like you and sometimes to scientific conferences. One of the things I've seen is that the understanding and the acceptance has grown. I seldom have to spend a lot of time with people who deny it, partly because they've learned not to come to sort of talk something. But there are fewer of those people around. Most people now accept that climate change is happening. But what I'm finding is most people also have no understanding of just how big a problem it is. We think it's something that, we'll recycle the garbage a little better and all will be well. It's not that, and that's what I'm going to try and show you today. And to do that, I want to start with a little bit of history, because a lot of people deny that we're causing climate change because climate's changed in the past, which is illogical, but nevertheless an argument. This is a very peculiar graph. If you look at the scale on the bottom, it's been compressed at this end. So it starts out here in hundreds of years, and over here it's hundreds of millions of years. So it's a very funny scale. But what we're looking at is the last 500 million years of the Earth's history. We're here. 500 million years ago is over here. And the top line is temperature, the average temperature of the planet. And so this is where the temperature has been in the recent past. It's starting to warm up. And you can see, yes, indeed, in the distant past, there's been times when it's a lot warmer, and there's been times when it's colder. The important thing to realize is two things. The last 11,000 years has been a period of exceptional regularity. So regular that when we had things like the Dust Bowl, or the earlier than that, the medieval warm period, which you may not have heard of, and it doesn't really matter, those were tiny little blips in the climate, and everybody got excited about them. Basically, for 11,000 years, the climate was exceptionally calm until very recently. I've just expanded that right-hand upper corner to show you this in more detail. 11,000 years. Before that, it was cooled down during the fluctuations of the ice ages, when the ice advanced and retreated. At its coldest, it was only about 4 or 5 degrees colder than now. And at its warmest, it was about at today's temperatures. But we're now rapidly warming it, and we're now beginning to experience temperatures that we haven't seen before. They've occurred in the distant past. The dinosaurs were quite happy in nice warm weather, but We haven't seen it. And this is being caused by us, and that video did an excellent job of showing why we're doing it. The increase in our numbers, the increase in our economy, and the increase in our use of energy. And unfortunately, we get most of our energy from fossil fuel. One of the things that's worth noting is our species only appeared on this planet 200,000 years ago. That was one error in that video. We've only been around for 200,000 years. There are other hominids who've been back further than that. But our species has never experienced anything warmer than what we have now. And civilization developed when we got to that stable climate. It's probable that we would have developed agriculture, even in a place where the climate varied, but having a stable climate meant that you could identify the time of the year when it was right to plant and the time of the year when it was right to bring in the crops. And with civilization, we then had cities and the whole rest of it. So the world's been in a special place, and now we are changing the climate very rapidly, and it's because we are warming it up by releasing fossil fuels. Now, how much is the climate changing? That sounds like a simple question, but it's complicated because we're still doing stuff that will make it change more. So, do we mean how much is it changing if we stop doing the bad stuff? Or do we mean how much is it going to change if we keep on going? And those are two different answers. Whoops, can we go back? Yeah. Well, some of the changes are baked in simply because there's so much ice on this planet, and you all know that ice melts slowly. If you've got a drink with ice in it, it takes a while for that ice to gradually melt. The same thing is happening on the planet. There was recent news media about 20 centimeters of sea level rise because of melting in Greenland. That was referring to what they call committed melting, the melting that is guaranteed to happen because of the amount of heat we have put into the planet already. Obviously, if we're going to continue putting CO2 into the atmosphere, it's going to melt more than that. And the real measures of what sea level is going to do is something quite a bit more than 20 centimeters, I guarantee. We've been talking about it since the late 70s. We've been talking about it seriously since the 90s. We still are not doing very much about it. Why not? And I think there are 5 reasons for this. And the first is that all of our experience has been in that place where the climate was rather stable. So if your whole experience and your whole history of civilization is in that situation, when someone comes along and says, oh, we're changing the climate, you say, oh, they're being silly. And so you say things like it's not a big deal, or climate change is in cycles. That's a favorite of people who want to deny everything. Oh, it'll get cold again. It always does. Or sometimes 3 to 4 degrees is nothing. And yet it doesn't seem like much for a Canadian. 3 or 4 degrees, that's nothing. Remember what I said about the ice ages. At their coldest, they were about 4 degrees colder than now. So that's one thing. We always lived in this reliable world, and here these scientists come along and say, oh, we're warming up the planet. Well, come on, they're being crazy. The next reason is our belief systems. There are many different belief systems, but many of them teach us that the world is a stable place. Some of them teach us that there are higher beings that are going to look after us and make sure nothing bad happens so long as we're good. If you behave the right way, everything will be fine. Those are lovely ideas. we need to remember we are clinging to a large rock which is hurtling through the universe going God knows where. Not something to be confident about. Incidentally, one of the reasons earthquakes are such a frightening natural disaster is because it's in the earthquake that the whole earth moves. All kinds of other disasters like forest fires or avalanches, something else is moving and getting in the way and getting hurt. But earthquakes, the earth moves. That's why it's so frightening. We think the world is a stable place. So our belief systems prevent us seeing climate change. Then there's a third reason. I've been talking about climate changing very fast, and it is, but it's still slow compared to the pace of our lives. So, for example, the warming that's currently going on is 10 times faster than it was 12,000 years ago. And it's the fastest it's been in the last 55 million years. And we've only experienced 200,000 of that 55. So the fact that we can't see it has to do more with our lack of ability to notice something. It's actually geologically or very rapidly. The glaciers have now already melted so much ice, and the meltwater has flowed down, getting closer to the center of the Earth as it flows down to sea level. The weight of that ice has been converted into the weight of water at a lower altitude, and that has caused the Earth's axis to slightly shift in its tilt. That's the extent of what's going on. And then finally, sea level is rising twice as fast as it was 50 years ago. So it's changing very fast, but we still don't notice it. And of course, the next reason is psychologically. We don't deal well with slow danger. Evolution has taught us to get out of the way of saber-toothed cats. And there were in fact 3 different species of saber-toothed cats, and we got pretty good at getting out of their way. But we're not very good at getting out of the way of something that's approaching slowly. We just kind of watch it. Oh yeah, oh, it's a car. Oh, it's coming towards me. Oh, maybe I should move. You know, psychologically, we don't deal well with slow danger. And the last one, and this one's important, vested interests arguing against the reality of climate change since the 70s have done a marvelous job. They began by saying it isn't happening. Then they said we didn't cause it. Then they said it's not serious enough to worry about. Then they said we need to know more about it before we risk upsetting the economy. And I don't know what they're saying now, but they're still at it. This book is about 10 years old, but it is an excellent expose and really worth reading because this isn't accidental denialism. This is a coordinated program of disinformation. Very well done. And that's made it difficult for people to grasp what is happening. So that's why we don't seem to be concerned. And yet the evidence for it is all around us. The Pakistan floods recently, 1/3 of the country submerged. I'm not saying it's never flooded before in Pakistan, but that was a really serious flood, and the floods are going to get worse. And the number of people living outdoors because their houses had been destroyed and were unlivable, almost the population of Canada. Think of what that means in terms of an impact on people. And of course, the same thing can happen here. We probably wouldn't have that much suffering because we don't have the density of population, we don't have the kinds of houses that they have in Pakistan. But still, the same kind of flooding can happen here. It happened in BC in November. Remember also that last year, BC had record warm temperatures during the heat dome, and they've had several years of record fires. We've been lucky in central Ontario. There's been bad weather driven by climate change all around us. Up in the north, fires, out west, out east, down south. We've been sitting here, yeah, doesn't matter. Climate change isn't real. It's going to come. We're going to have the ice storm of the century, or we're going to have the tornado of the century. I'm not wishing it on anyone, but it's foolish to assume we're not going to get bad weather. In 2016, the Watershed Council looked at local impacts of climate change because the same kind of complacency is up there. Now, this is Muskoka. It's always been wonderful. We took a very simple approach. We said, what's the climate going to be like in the middle of the century? On the grounds that that wasn't too far into the future. And then what will the impacts be? And I'm going to show you 2 slides of the data that we got. And the first is the change in temperature. And so this graph consists of 2 pairs of lines, blue lines and red lines. And the blue lines are the mean daily minimum each month of the year and the mean daily maximum each month of the year. So the average day in January, this is the low temperature, that is the high. The red lines are for mid-century. And what you see there is, yeah, it got warmer. Doesn't look too bad. No big deal. Until you put in a little bit of emphasis. Yeah. 0 degrees and 30 degrees. 0 is when ice melts. And if you look at those graphs, the daily maximum graph, there are 3 months at the moment in Muskoka where the temperatures on average are below freezing all day long. Frozen solid. And in the future, there's only 1 month that might be frozen solid. So that's a big change. It's not a little change. And up at the top there, 30 degrees, that's heat wave temperature. 30 degrees, we get heat waves in Muskoka. We'll get a week of above 30 in the average year. But our average temperatures in Muskoka are 26 in July. Except in the future it's going to be 30. So heat waves they're not going to be heat waves, that's going to be normal. And I put air conditioning in a couple of years ago, which is very naughty because it uses energy, but we did it anyway. It didn't used to be something you needed in Muskoka, but now we do. This is the graph for precipitation, because our warming of the climate also changes the pattern of rainfall. It's not as neat a graph as the other one. The blue line is the present amount of precipitation per month, and the red line is the mid-century. Yes, it's going to be wetter in Muskoka, about 10% wetter. But the extra precipitation is coming in the fall and winter. In the winter and spring. In the summer and fall, there's effectively no change. The extra is coming in the winter and spring. And you may think that, therefore, the summer and fall will be much as they are now, but that's not true because it's warmer. And because it's warmer, there's going to be more evaporation. And evaporation plays a huge role in the water cycle. And with more evaporation, those summers and falls are going to be dry. There's going to be droughts. There's going to be streams drying up that have never dried up before. There's going to be wetlands disappearing. There's going to be wells running dry. It's not a trivial change. And the extra water in the winter and spring in a bad year, which means a year when it stays cooler so that extra water stays there as a lot of snow, we're going to have floods in the spring that we've never seen before. So these projections are telling us that even in a place like Central Ontario, and your data would be very similar to ours, be a little bit warm, you probably have slightly less of an increase in precipitation because you have fewer lakes around you, but basically it would be quite similar. One more of these. Yeah, the extra in our precipitation is primarily because the lakes are remaining open longer. The message is, when you sit down and look at the data, there are changes coming which are potentially quite big. And we can then say, well, what will these have, what kind of impact will these have on the environment? And we see that the lakes are going to be warmer, they're going to be more biologically active, because they're going to have a long growing season. There's going to be more risk of algal blooms. There's going to be drought in the fall. Spring floods are going to be more frequent. We're going to have changes to our forests because of the change in the climate, new tropical diseases for other animals as well as us, and greater stress on our power grids and also other aspects of our infrastructure because the storms are going to be more violent. So all of those things are happening. Some of them are well advanced. These are data showing the days at which ice formed on the lake and the days at which it came off. So the date is up here. And what that shows was that ice is forming later in the year and leaving the lake slightly earlier. And the result of that is the lakes are already have a 3-week longer open water period than they used to in 1975, which is a very long notice. People use the ice in Muskoka so they can go across on the ice in the middle of winter to do construction in places that are hard to get to by the road. And now they're finding their winter season is getting shorter. Climate means our forests should be marching north 5 to 10 kilometers a year, which is difficult for trees to do. This is a graph showing not the distribution of sugar maple, but the climate suitable for sugar maple. So the orange color is a sort of an okay climate, and the green color is a good climate for sugar maple. And of course, we have sugar maple around here. Well, if you go to the end of the century, that's where the climate's going to be. And you want your maple syrup, you have to go to northern Quebec. So there are changes that are going to affect our forests simply because of the change in climate. There's also the drought going to increase the fire risk, and you have more fire, that changes forests as well. So what do we do about it? It's all very well to talk about how bad it's going to be. What do we do about it? And one thing we don't do is jump to a simple, easy to understand solution. Mostly they're wrong. Maybe like the planet B is wrong. The solution to climate change. So we've got to do something better than that. And I think there are 3 things that we have to do as a society and as individuals. The first of these is we've got to recognize that we don't live in the world we lived in the 20th century. The world of the 21st century is a world which is changing progressively as its climate changes. And that is a different kind of world than any world we've lived in before. We've got to appreciate and understand that and adapt to that because we can't prevent it happening. We can't expect the environment to be the way it's always been because climate change has destroyed the static world that we've always lived in. We've got to change to adapt to that. That's the first thing. The second thing is we've got to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. Every one of us has got to support efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In a country like Canada, that means major changes to our economy, and we've got to understand that just because fossil fuel reserves are in the ground doesn't mean we have a moral obligation to dig them up. We need to leave them there. If you want, God put them there. Leave them there. He didn't say dig them up. If you don't like that argument, you can take another argument, which is to say, who else told you you had to dig them up? We don't have to dig them up. Especially in a place like Canada where we dig them up and export them because we don't need the energy. We don't need to dig them up. Now, changing our economy is a huge change. It's going to be costly. But most economists see the cost as much less than the cost of not acting on climate change. And also, there's going to be immense stimulation of the economy. So it's not something to be frightened about, it's something to embrace. There are opportunities in changing our economy, but we need to get busy doing it because we haven't done it yet. And of course, there are many, many ways for individuals to participate in this retooling. And this is just one. Some people can afford them even now. The electric car, you save a bundle of energy, emissions, you save some money, and the quality of driving is amazing. But there's lots of other ways. You can put solar panels on your roof. You can replace your aging furnace with a heat pump. You can replace your windows with better insulated windows. You can lower your thermostat and wear a sweater. There's a whole range of things, and individuals should be doing what they individually can manage, because some can manage more and some can manage less. And the one other thing that individuals should be doing is they should be voting for those politicians who actually seem likely to do something about this problem, because we need politicians of that type in our parliaments. So that's the second thing. Support efforts to make these changes, do what you can to help those changes. And then the third thing, and the last thing, is we've got to strengthen the resilience of our infrastructure, because we know the storms are going to get worse. We've got to build so that when we have a storm, it's not a disaster. And we've also got to improve the ways in which we manage environment and land use. And this is a jargony thing, and I'm not going into this terribly complex graph, but in Muskoka, we are pushing for bringing in what we call integrated watershed management, which is simply a way of managing which is much more effective. It's a little more complicated. It's a lot more effective than the kind of conventional approaches to land management that we've used for 100 years. We need management that can cope with a changing environment, and the old ways are no longer adequate. So that's my message. To summarize, there is no planet B. We've got to live on this planet, and we'd be wise to not destroy it. We'll find it rather difficult. Climate change really is a big deal, even in central Ontario. Some of the changes are unavoidable. We are going to have heavier rainfalls. We are going to have storms where there's nuisance flooding in Barrie. Some of the changes can be avoided if we reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we reduce greenhouse gas emissions by taking various steps so that we either use less energy or we use energy from other sources. And we can do those things. If we take these steps, if we do these things, there's no reason why we cannot cope with climate change. We can contain it so that it doesn't become a change of 3, 4, 5 degrees. We can manage the changes that we can't avoid, and we can continue to live our lives. We in Canada live in a pretty good place in terms of climate change compared to many other places in the world. Pakistan is one of them. Bangladesh is another. There's oodles of places where the problems are going to be bigger than the problems we're likely to face. But we've got to recognize that the problems we've got to face too, and we've got to help those other parts of the world deal with their problems. But if we do those things, we can continue to enjoy life. So basically, what it said at the end of that video, it's really up to us. Do we want the world that we have, which is going to talk because of us, or do we want the world we could have, which says we have to change our behavior? So thank you. And